This is Through the Rearview, a podcast from Three Aspens Media. I'm your host, Lindsay Young. On this show, we look back with the leaders, innovators, and storytellers who have helped shape their industries. We unpack the lessons they've learned, the pivots they've made, and the legacies they've built. It's a chance to reflect, reconnect, and get a view of what really matters. In this season, we're focused on the wholesale distribution industry. Enjoy! I'm Lindsay Young. I'm president of Three Aspens Media, and today I have the privilege of speaking with Ernie Coutermarsh. Hi, Ernie. How are you doing?
Hi, Lindsay. How are you today?
I'm doing great. I'm going to give a quick introduction, give people a taste of your background real quick before we jump into our conversation.
Okay.
Yeah. Ernie's career in the plumbing PVF, which for those who don't know, pipe valves and fittings industry spans over 5 decades. Before he built a long and distinguished career at FW Webb, Ernie served in the U.S. Marine Corps, an experience that helped shape his leadership style and commitment to discipline, teamwork, and service. Throughout his time at FW Webb, Ernie played a key role in the company's growth, navigating industry changes and driving strategic expansion with cultural fit top of mind, which we'll talk a bit about later on. He's also been actively involved in industry organizations like the American Supply Association, which is the plumbing PVF group, and AD, mentoring the next generation of leaders and giving back to the industry that shaped him. Now, in his post-career chapter, he continues to dedicate his time to causes he's passionate about, supporting initiatives that make a difference in the community. His commitment has never wavered, whether in business, in military, or in your work today. So in this conversation, we're going to explore Ernie's incredible journey, the pivotal moments that shaped his career, and his advice, most importantly, to the next generation of leaders in the industry. How's that?
That's pretty darn good. Thank you, Lindsay.
You're welcome. So you've had, as I just outlined, you've had a very long and impactful career in distribution, and I couldn't even cover it all in that introduction. But can you take us back to the beginning? What first drew you to the distribution industry and why you ended up staying for more than 50 years?
Well, it was serendipity that got me into the industry. After I was discharged from the Marine Corps, uh, I decided I would move to. I grew up in New England, in New Hampshire, but I said I had an aunt and uncle that lived in Maryland on the Eastern Shore, and I said, "What the heck? I'm gonna move down there for a while, see what that's like." And so I went. My original plan was to become a member of the state police.
Oh,
That was my plan. So I walked into the local state police barracks in Maryland and said I'd like to apply. I said, and he looked at me and he says, "Well, you got to be 5'10" minimum."
what? Is
Yeah,
that true?
yeah.
Huh.
He said, "Well," I said, "I just got out of the Marine Corps." I said, I shoot straight and I hit hard." No, he said, "You got to be 5'10" minimum, you know. So anyway, that was the end of my state police career,
Short-lived. Yeah.
short-lived. And I was talking with my uncle because I was basically looking for a job. And he mentioned Shore Distributors, uh, a locally owned, family owned business. And so I walked in uh, and applied for a job, any job. And they hired me because they had an opening. And the opening was for counter sales in Salisbury. So that was my first exposure to the industry that I ended up spending my entire life with.
Yeah.
Uh, but the reason my because it was family owned, uh, the the president at the time was Frank Morris, and Shore Distributors is still in the Morris family. Frank was very inspirational. You know, he just had that thing about him. He just charismatic, and wanted to make sure that everyone, regardless of their position, was really understood uh, how important customers were. And all your interaction, regardless of your job description, was all part of the ingredients to keep growing the business. So he took us to a seminar. I was impressed. And I forget the leader that's training seminar, but the whole thing was on enthusiasm. That was,
Oh, interesting.
yeah, and how you can't fake it.
It's
And
probably true.
so, we all had to like brainstorm on how we could enthusiastically and sincerely engage customers and on and on. So it just there was just something about that company that really I liked it a lot because I could sense that they cared about you. And they had about 9 branches, so I was like on counter sales for a while, but I had already determined I wanted outside sales. Uh, they were they were chasing business, looking for customers, and keeping the customers we had. But they also got a company car, and I said, "Boy, that'd be nifty." You know? So I mentioned to Frank Morris that I'd like to get into outside sales if I could, and he said the price we pay a little bit here for loyalty is that people don't turn over. Is
Oh,
I don't have an opening right now, but he said I'm going to have an opening as a manager of one of my locations. And shortly thereafter, I was sent to Cambridge, Maryland to take over that branch. And
nice.
so once again, he trusted me. Uh, and to work in a company where they trust you to grow in a job that you've never done before, based upon just how they feel about you, uh, I was really grateful for that. So I was there. I was a short distributor for 2 years, maybe a little over two. And the reason I ended up at FW Webb is because FW Webb was based in New England, and I was home on vacation. And I walked into the Nashua, New Hampshire branch of FW Webb, and uh, I said, I'm one of these days I'm coming back to New England, but I really want an outside sales job. And the manager there said, "You're a lucky day." Uh, they had just promoted an outside sales guy that worked for him to take over another branch at Webb. But he said, you're going to have to make a commitment like now.
Oh, wow.
So turns out that the owner of FW Webb and Frank Morris were friends. They knew each other through the industry.
Hmm.
And so he called Frank. I went back and I told Frank I really wanted to move back to New England. And Frank had already talked to John Pope, and he had given me a really good recommendation, which was
Nice.
another wonderful gesture, let's say.
Yeah, because you were leaving him,
Yeah,
and yet he was willing to make sure that you could go
yeah. But
on that
he
next step.
understood that I really wanted sales.
Yeah.
Uh, so anyway, I I got a U-Haul, put my stuff in it, drove my car up here, and I went to work for FW Webb in 1969 in July, outside sales.
And stayed there for the rest of your career.
Yeah, I was there for 50 years and 3 months.
Nice.
Yeah,
Nice. What was it about outside sales that appealed to you?
I liked two things. One, uh, the customers are the ones that decide whether you're going to get the business or not. And I also noticed that they didn't usually just have one supplier, they had at least two. And so you were out there trying to influence that customer to favor you more than the other person.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I'm a people person, and building relationships, which were really the anchor,
Yeah.
uh, was a responsibility that I really wanted and enjoyed. And because contractors have, they have their own customers,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and you're always trying to fix something or a problem or a solution. And so you end up being an important part of that customer's daily life.
Yeah.
Their phone rings off the hook in the morning, something broke, water heater's leaking, the boiler's not working, something's not working. They get very little notice, and they need material and solutions uh, quickly.
Yeah.
It's kind of a 911 universe, but you can't let them down.
No.
Oh,
No. Sounds really rewarding.
yes.
Yeah. Um, so I mean, you've seen a lot of change over those 50 years and 3 months in the industry, and you were part of a lot of storied institutions, right? Even before
Mhm.
that, with the Marines, with FW Webb, which has been around for a very long time.
Yeah,
Uh,
158 years.
yeah. So how does a company maintain that legacy without compromising future growth? How can they hold on to the past and recognize the past while also evolving and staying relevant in the future?
Well, every company has to create a culture,
Hmm.
and in the Marine Corps, the first thing they teach you is the history, the
Hmm.
traditions, and the responsibility,
Yeah.
uh, and you develop a camaraderie because everyone counts on the other person, and the stakes are sometimes life-threatening, let's say.
Hmm. Hmm.
And there's a certain pride that you feel when you're basically go through that orientation and training to belong to an organization
Hmm.
that is, in our minds, the best, right? And FW Webb, the thing that impressed me right away was the year they were over 100 years old when I joined them,
Incredible.
right? Uh, so once again, there's a pride of belonging to a company that has been in business for 100 years, and then you attract people who want to, one, maintain that legacy and be a part of it. And with that is a concomitant responsibility to help maintain the business that you have and to be constantly focused on growing your business without compromising the service levels that your existing customers require.
Hmm.
And so John Pope, who owned FW Webb and is the Pope family, uh, his father, I think, acquired FW Webb around 1933, and that was Roger Pope. And John John Pope, he went to Dartmouth College, and he went in the Navy. He was a Navy officer, and then he came to work for Webb, and his as a salesperson. And his dad, unfortunately, uh, had a heart attack
Mm.
attending a convention, industry convention, and all of a sudden, John, as the owner, is now the caretaker of the legacy and the history.
Yeah. It's a big, big
Yeah.
responsibility.
So uh, he created a very attractive proposition. A lot of responsibility, a lot of accountability, but he will always say, because we were multi-branch and we're multi-branch today, but the deal was that if you manage one of those locations,
Hmm.
you could say, you are me because I can't be there. And I want you to run it like me. I don't want you to have to check with me every 5 minutes for a decision. As long as you understand what our goals and objectives are, what our culture is, what our expectations are for a customer. At the same time, because you are me, we have a responsibility in a growing company to keep providing opportunity for every other person that joins the company. And you can't do that unless you're growing. So there's a lot of responsibility there that makes you think,
Hmm.
because you have to think like the owner. And he would often use his naval term, Navy chiefs. He'd always say, he said, the chiefs run the Navy. So he wanted to have a management structure where the people that were running these different locations were very entrepreneurial in their thinking and also confident in that they could make mistakes as long as they were motivated by the right reasons.
Hmm.
You would make mistakes, right? But to me, that was exciting. Because like I said, I started in outside sales. I was in outside sales in that branch for about a year, and he gave me my first opportunity to manage a location.
Hmm.
And you have in your mind that employees are supposed to do what they're told. And in
Yeah.
this culture, you're supposed to basically tell yourself what you're supposed to do every day. Like,
And
oh,
that can be both freeing, but
yeah,
also,
it's a little, yeah. At first, you're you gotta. It's like skating on the thin ice a little bit. You gotta get used to it. But it and then we created a camaraderie because every one of us needed each other in order to keep all the promises that we made.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, so yeah, it was really kind of exciting because we were always growing and we were always growing because we had the freedom to make decisions, not just to take care of the day to day, but what's your plan? We had to submit an annual plan, budget, on and on, and then figure out how do you grow your business. The only real way you can do it is take the business away from somebody else who already has it. Uh, and you would outperform.
Hmm.
You kept pushing the envelope, raising the bar, so that it it just became frankly it was fun. But really, that's the only way you can grow.
It's great.
John used to say that every time he saw a competitor's truck on the road, it was humbling.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. So you mentioned the Marines. How did your time in the Marines influence you, Ernie? What kind of lessons did you take from that part of your life that you carried into, your career?
Well, uh, life gets pretty serious pretty quickly when you're in the United States military. Uh, so when just some of the ironies of life, I met John Kennedy with my dad because he was running for president of the United States. He was the United States Senator from Massachusetts. My dad was a politician. So consequently, New Hampshire being the first primary in the nation, anyone that wants to be president has to go to New Hampshire whether they like it or not, right? So growing up in a family that's in politics, you see a lot of people, and as children or as kids, you don't really appreciate it till later in life. You say, man. So so anyway, the picture behind me is my dad and John Kennedy in 1959
Amazing.
running for president, and in my hometown of Lebanon. He came and he gave a speech in our town hall, and my dad introduced him. So anyway, he got elected in 1960,
Mhm.
and I was in high school.
Okay.
And 2 years later, 1962, I graduated from high school and joined the Marine Corps.
Okay. Right
And
out of high school.
yeah,
Okay.
right out of high school. And went to Paris Island. Was there for 3 months, then went to Camp Geiger for infantry training, and in late September,
Mhm.
uh, we were going to have our first opportunity to go home on leave. And I couldn't wait because I wanted to get my uniform on and just show all my classmates and everybody else,
Yeah,
that I had made it through boot camp.
that's awesome. You're probably so proud.
Yeah. So anyway, I finally picked October to go home.
Hmm.
Well, I got as far as I took a train, so I got as far as Richmond, Virginia, and President Kennedy, this guy that I met in my hometown, declared the Cuban Missile Crisis
Oh my gosh.
because so the Russians, Khrushchev, had planted missiles in Cuba, and of course,
Hmm.
we have Guantanamo Naval Base there, and there are Marines there who are responsible for the security of the base. Next thing you know, I'm on a ship heading to Guantanamo Bay, all because of this guy that my father introduced me to as the next president of the United States. Now he's my commander in chief and president.
Amazing.
So I went to Gitmo. We call it Gitmo.
Yep.
Uh, I was uh, I was there for 6 months, and but all of a sudden life started getting serious. Could have got very serious. But behind the scenes, the political solution was we had missiles in Turkey pointed at the Russians. So it was a quid pro quo. We moved ours, they moved theirs, you know, and nobody got hurt. At the same time, though, we were involved in Vietnam. Now, I never went, I was lucky, but I learned real quickly that people that you are with, they say, well, I just got orders, I have to report to Vietnam and whatever. And then they wouldn't come back. And that's when it started to dawn on you the consequences. Very young,
Yeah.
that the price of what we call freedom and the American way and everything else, there's a price that's paid.
Very early on in your life, you gained probably perspective on life that people who are 50 or 60 may never
Oh
have
yeah,
gotten, right? You were hit with those serious consequences very early on. I mean, that must have really colored kind of your,
oh yeah, it did. So
yeah, life going forward.
so the and then so anyway, uh, Mister, I want to introduce you to the next president of the United States who sent me to Cuba,
Hmm.
which was that was October 1962. In November 1963, I went to his funeral. when he was assassinated. I went to Arlington Cemetery.
For the funeral itself.
So that's why I'm a big student of history. All I read is history and biographies, and because I'm fascinated by all these people that made up our history. And you just can't go by with the sound bites. People are much more complex than that, right? So if you read about Winston Churchill or Abraham Lincoln or any former president of the United States, they wouldn't need little sound bites or these little nasty one-liners that you hear all day long. They all, in many cases, they all tried to do the best they could at the time they lived in. And in some cases, had tremendous responsibility on their shoulders.
I love that perspective.
Yeah.
People aren't black and white.
Yeah. I've got another picture. My daughter, Ava, lives in Houston, her and her husband, but they have a house in Algonquin, Maine. So they live real close to Kennebunkport. So when both Bushes were president of the United States, they have a house up there in Kennebunkport.
Nice.
And so on Father's Day, my daughter invited me up, and we went to a restaurant right near the Bush compound, they call it. And so, and the table right behind us was President Herbert Walker Bush, his son George W. Bush.
George W. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they were both, the father had already been president. Now the son was president. And his mom was there, Barbara Bush, and the whole Bush family was there. And George W. stands up in the restaurant and says, "Would you all sing happy birthday to my mom?"
That's amazing.
Everybody sang happy birthday to the mom. And so I just like that human side
Yeah.
of things,
Yeah. They're real people with
Oh,
real
yeah.
feeling.
I'm going to grab something if I can find it. Here it is.
Sure. So many great things behind you.
This is a note from the George Bush the first.
Oh, that's so cool.
I'll read it though.
Yeah.
He lost the election, right?
Yeah.
So I sent him a note. He said, "Thank you so much for your expression of confidence. It was a tough campaign, but we are thankful for so many blessings. Among them are family and millions of wonderful supporters like you, and we have the satisfaction of giving it our best, but clearly victory was not to be. Barbara and I will always be grateful."
That's so cool.
Pretty
That's so
neat,
cool.
But, they didn't have to send that.
No.
This was right beside it. This is the invitation to the inauguration of President Kennedy, because you can't see it very well. I just love all that. I love it because they're all just people doing the best they can.
Yeah.
It's just, tough job.
It's probably the hardest job in the world.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So this very human understanding that you gained very early in your, I guess, career and before you joined FW Webb. I mean, you've been committed, throughout your career to helping others, to helping develop other leaders, to supporting other companies, to supporting the industry. So one of those things is your involvement with associations and buying groups, right? So you're
Yes.
really involved with ASA, you're really involved with affiliated distributors, right?
Yeah, AD.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so tell me about that and tell me about what you believe the value of those organizations to be, because you were very committed to supporting those and to supporting the others in the industry.
Well, in the American, a lot of the members of AD are also in ASA.
Mm.
Uh,
Yep.
every company, if you want to make sure you're still here tomorrow,
Right.
you have to pay attention to anything that is changing, not just with your company, but changing with your customers.
Hmm.
So what was changing, which was affecting the electrical wholesalers at the time, was that corporate customers, and I, at Webb, I was responsible for the industrial side, which
Hmm.
essentially you get right down to who are who are the industrial customers that make the economy run. So up
Yeah.
here, I had Raytheon, General Electric, uh, International. They're just big Fortune 500 type companies, General Electric, and on and on. And so we, way back when, it was just a matter of if something broke, they called you up, you shipped over what they needed to fix it. They had a maintenance department, and it was all
Yeah.
wonderful. But uh, they started looking not at the cost of items, but transactional costs. So when you went into a stockroom that had your stuff in row 1 and 2, row 4, 5, and 6 was electrical stuff. Then if you went over here with somebody else's stuff,
Hmm.
but to the person responsible for the company investment in stuff, they were looking for ways to reduce the total cost. And so, and I said, we are very vulnerable unless we can figure out a way to work together in conjunction with the procurement people who are responsible to their bosses for total investment. How can we reduce the total cost without having to sacrifice our normal markup? So we devised a solution that was a little complicated. We were going to create a kind of an integrated supply solution.
Yeah.
So in order to do that, we formed a group called the Northeast Vendor Alliance.
Ah, okay.
And so FW Webb took care of the plumbing, pipe, valve, and fittings. Uh, the best electrical industrial supplier at that time has subsequently been bought out by a big national brand. But we just took the best of the best in our local area. We got together the owners and we sat there and said, how are we going to work together? And so we came up with uh, a little software that we could install at our customer. We we barcoded everything in that stockroom. The customer did not have to change vendors.
Oh, nice.
Any order for anything in that stockroom went through our software, and it got split off in the back because we took care of that side. Uh, so that the electrical guy got their stuff, we got our stuff, and then when we sat down with the company, instead of talking about uh, cost the way we used to think of it, we sat down and we came up with the way they think about it.
It's
And
good.
said, okay, first, we want to cut the cost of acquisition. So by using barcode, nobody had to call us anymore. Then we worked on the cost of possession. We shrunk the inventory that they had there because we could.
Yeah.
We treated it just like one of our locations. We had mids and maxes. The software, when it took 3, we replaced 3. And nobody talked to nobody. It was just
Just happened. Yeah.
easy.
Yeah.
And then the most important area where we could help them was the cost of the utilization of product in the process. And so we would gives them uh, a return on investment based upon how much it costs to produce a pound of steam, how much they were using and how much they were wasting. And the guy
Right.
goes, "No kidding, how come no one told us about this before?" I said, "Because you weren't set up to listen. That's why."
And you did this with a group of other distributors
Yeah,
to so you collaborated within the
yeah,
industry to be able to do this.
oh
What a
yeah.
great example.
So what happened was the generally with most industrial manufacturing plants, the electrical spend is more than my spend.
Yeah.
So that's where AD came in
Okay.
because AD electrical wholesalers were being impacted around the country with the same demands, but didn't have a solution because they couldn't do it by themselves.
Right.
So Bill Weisberg, who's CEO of AD and has been for a long time,
Yeah.
he talked to me and he knew about our local Northeast Mineral lines, and uh, he said, "We want you guys to join AD. We're going to have a separate division for pipe valve and fitting."
Nice.
So that was
Okay.
so the PVF division was the second addition to affiliated distributors. And then we had
You were
electric,
part of that wave,
yeah,
initial wave.
and
Okay.
then they kept adding the other disciplines.
Yeah, they're quite large now. They
Yeah,
have many, many product categories.
yeah. So then they developed the one thing we couldn't do locally was we could not provide a national solution for GE. We could
Wow.
we could take care of our location.
Yeah.
So with AD, we could create a national solution using the entire population around the country, and we could come up with a solution for privately held, independently owned companies, which were AD companies, as opposed to them trying to figure out how to do it with one national company. It'd be very difficult, to be honest with you.
That would be
So
hard.
they took our software and made it even more robust. And they renamed it, and they created a whole capabilities within AD to be able to provide this. They call it supply force.
I had heard of Supply Force, so
Yeah,
that was the origins of that.
yeah. So it just became a national solution to do the same thing we were doing regionally.
Okay. Very
And
cool.
so anyway, it was exciting. It was fun. And the people, the distributors in AD that I was involved with were just top-notch independents. And in some cases, we built relationships because a lot of these family businesses, unlike Webb, didn't have this 100-year plan or 150-year plan. And so by building relationships with the principals and relationships based on trust and confidence, that when they got around to thinking that maybe they might want to talk about selling that company or they're being approached by someone. Now, a lot
Mhm.
of venture capital companies, what they cared most about, one was their people.
Yeah.
And the reason Webb made sense to a lot of them because they knew that we had this over 100-year track record and culture of taking care of the people that work for FW Webb. So they wanted to make sure that when the transaction was over, their people were in a good place with a company that had a culture that was family owned and that could also provide them the opportunity to grow because we're a growing company. They're people. So that was really the most attractive part, I think, to them when they wanted to talk to a trusted company to basically end up with their people.
Right.
And
Yeah.
they wouldn't have to feel a little guilty maybe that they orphaned them in a bad
Yeah.
sense, you know.
I mean, there are a lot of stories where that happens, right?
Yes.
Where you sell the business and the people end up in worse shape, or they lose their jobs, or it's just a bad. And just to give context to the people listening, one of your roles at FW Webb was overseeing the acquisition efforts of the company to help grow the industrial division, right?
Yes.
So, um, and I feel like, and please, I'd love your perspective on this. A lot of the times when acquisitions fail, right, or don't deliver the ROI that you're looking for, to use business speak,
Right.
is the integration part, right? Bringing the people into the organization and integrating them, because it's really, distribution companies are made of people, right?
Yes.
That is the lifeblood of these organizations you're acquiring. So if that's not the priority of the acquirer, or that's not given what's supposed to be due, you're going to have challenges integrating and bringing those people and that organization in and actually seeing the impact that you want. Is that, I mean, and you actually cared about these people that you guys were bringing into the fold as well. So would you agree that that is a very critical part of the process of making an acquisition work?
It's critical because once you, I mean, as we grew Web, we started expanding beyond our traditional geography. We were always New England.
Yeah.
Uh, but a lot of manufacturers, when they look at the market and they divide up the country, they look at it as the Northeast. And the Northeast includes, in addition to New England, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, normally.
Okay.
Okay. So we, it was just a combination of one, there were companies outside of our traditional geography that were thinking of maybe selling. So that was opportunity for us, but it was a little different because we were crossing the Mason-Dixon line a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Big change.
Yeah, when you consider the FW Webb as the sponsor for the Boston Red Sox, right?
Which is,
Once you
yeah,
get
which does
past
everything.
Connecticut, they're Yankee fans. So, uh, which is why today we're also the sponsor of the New York Yankees and the Red Sox.
That must have been a big shift.
Yeah, well, culturally it was back at the ranch, because we've always up here we're supposed to hate the Yankees.
Right.
Uh,
So there's a divide in the organization.
but anyway, we we made a conscious decision to become a Northeast distributor, and we did it in most cases by the acquisition of companies that were relationships we'd already built within our AD or ASA universe, and they trusted us, and we provided a solution that they were looking for. It was probably the most user-friendly all the way around.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
If I
Because
were-
these were small family businesses, right?
yeah,
So,
the first company was Bergen Industrial in Elmwood Park, New Jersey, and and there are still family members of the previous owners working for us still.
that says a lot.
Yeah,
That says a lot.
yeah.
Because they didn't have to. They didn't
No,
have to stay.
no, because when you're not buying a building, we don't, you know what I mean? And you're not
Yeah.
buying, and you don't buy people either.
That's true too.
They have to want to stay. And that's why your culture is important. Uh, because that's why they will stay, because of that culture. And and if they didn't stay, what you bought was nothing. I was fortunate that I never woke up one day and found out that my company had been sold or acquired. Uh,
Hmm.
that was a real blessing. But I empathized, for people who were going to be acquired and maybe didn't know. Uh, so we made great efforts to make sure that was the most important part of the plan. How this going to affect the people, and how can we minimize that negative, scary part and bring them up to speed with why this is going to be good for them and why we care. And when you look at the people and how long they've worked at FW Webb, I was there over 50 years, but a lot of my comrades, they retired at 35 and 40 years, right? And I call them quitters. Just jokingly, but the fact of the matter is that our relationships never end. It's crazy.
Ernie, you've
Yep.
retired from FW Web after that amazing career, but you're still keeping
Mhm.
very busy, of course. I feel like any person I know in my life who is retired is busier than I am. So, what are you keeping busy with today? What gets you
Well,
excited?
I consult with industry people who just want
Yeah.
advice. Uh, but I got involved in a nonprofit. Uh, I was looking for something uh, to satisfy that heart connection part of humanity, right? So I
Absolutely.
met this gal.
Yeah.
Well, I had driven by Ironstone Farm, which is the name of this nonprofit, because it's right here in my hometown. But I just thought it was a writing academy or something, right? So I met the executive director, Dee Dee O'Brien, and she invited me on a tour. Well, it turns out they provide equine therapy.
Oh,
And so she said, would you like to serve on our board? So anyway, I got introduced to it, and they basically service so many personal needs. It's unbelievable, right? So they have
yeah.
these kids, they just touch my heart. And that's the glue that keeps me there because it's a lot of work being in a nonprofit. And I'm responsible for, they call it the development committee, raising money, right?
Raising money, basically. Yeah.
Raising money for a charity is as competitive and as difficult as anything I've ever done, right?
Amazing.
And what
Yeah.
keeps me going is I go there and I watch these kids, they're dealing with cancer, cerebral palsy, all kinds of stuff.
Hmm.
And one, they're inspirational because they just, once they get there, so we have these, licensed therapists, but we also have the host people. They have to work in tandem, right?
Hmm.
Then we have kids that are, it's called Siblings Day. They're foster kids that get split up as a family and they're all over the place. But we bring them all together for a weekend and so they can kind of bond again. So it's just a wonderful, wonderful organization that needs a lot of money to keep it running. What happens is everybody's got a problem that's not a real
Yeah.
problem. And these little
Yep.
kids, they got real problems, but they deal with it with such a inner strength and innocence.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
anything we can do to make their life a little lighter, and for their family needs support too.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Ernie. Um, it's not a great transition to the next set of questions, but it is
Yeah.
about giving back your thoughts and advice to the next generation. So I have a few final questions that we're asking everyone that comes on this podcast.
Okay.
So I'll just jump into that. So if you could go back, this is a big question, and give advice to yourself when you were just starting out in this industry, what would it be?
Well, one of my favorite things is you never take no from someone who can't say yes, you know, which is in sales a very
Mm-hmm.
important lesson. Uh, but you know, if you're
Yeah.
going to work for a company, you have to look for a company that's going to not just give you a salary and benefits. You want to really take a close look and say, talk to the people that have, number one, how long have they been there? Longevity is a pretty good measurement, right? And find out why. The why question is very important, right? Before you even interview, you can you can you can make with LinkedIn today and everything else, you can find people real easily, and you can find out, you know, you got to make sure that you know what you want and they know what you want and they can give you what you want if you give them your little heart and soul and energy, right? But and nobody wants to be an employee. You know, I hate that word.
Yeah.
They want to make a difference. They
It's
want to be
not
able to make a difference.
right. Yeah.
But in order to make a difference, you got to have
Mm-hmm.
the you got to you got to have the environment where you are allowed to make a difference and where if you want ideas, you got to be strong enough to take them, right? I'm not, yeah, I'm not going to repeat
Absolutely.
what you already think you know just to keep my job. I want to be able to
Yeah.
tell you exactly what I think and why I think it
Yeah.
and why we have to do
Yeah.
something different, right? The
Mhm.
company I went to work for in 1969 was, like I said, just over 100 years old. Now they're approaching 160. They're a different company today. They had to be. But they were able to adapt because they listened. They had people who weren't afraid to tell you what you need to know, and you were given the autonomy and independence to get it done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That last part is huge.
The you know, some companies have company manuals about that thick, you know.
Yeah.
And my reality check is this: God created the world and the universe, and He gave us 10 rules, just 10. And every 7 days,
Mm-hmm.
you're supposed to go back for a refresher course, right? Every Sunday, to go back and say, wait a
Yeah.
minute, we only have
Yeah.
10. And yeah, so, but you know, if you surround yourself, if you find yourself surrounded by people who care, man, you're in a great place. Yeah.
Amazing.
And I was lucky.
Hey, what's one thing about the old school way of doing business that you still think still holds true today?
Don't forget that your customers are not data points, they're people. Okay.
Hey, I like that.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
otherwise, they won't be your customer for long because someone else is going to take them away. The people, I think, even more than ever, want to deal or want to feel in the course of their day that they matter and that you know who they are. Yeah, I think that's important because they can go anywhere. You know, the stuff that we sell is not that unique, right? Right.
That is absolutely
So,
true. Yeah.
and there are companies that you know, if the relationships doesn't matter to anyone, then you might as well just buy everything from Amazon, right?
Based on your knowledge and experience, our
Mhm.
final question today, what do you think should excite the next generation of leaders in distribution?
Well, what should excite them is that you have to remember that distribution is a vital function. And that function, you can drive anything through that function if you're the best provider of the function of distribution. In the supply chain,
Mm.
you have the manufacturers that make something, you get the end users that need it. Neither one of them wants that inventory until they need it. The manufacturer, once they make it, they don't want it. So that's why distributors keep building bigger and bigger warehouses. Because in the supply chain, that relationship between the manufacturer and the distributor, the manufacturer makes it, you take ownership of it and bring it close to the customer so that when they need to take that inventory to solve their problem, you've got it. And not and then
Yeah.
the relationship between the distributor and manufacturer or their rep, they also have a rep in there, is to constantly being in front of that customer with why your product is better than, or to help them answer that question when they're trying to sell a developer on building 300 houses on which products they're going to bring to that solution and how you can help them be to keep up with the constant changes in technology. Equipment alone
Yeah.
is a challenge. But the distributor is the provider of that, the good ones. So it's not just the stuff. The distributor has the personal relationship because these contractors come to your counter every day because they have to. Something broke, I need it now. In that time that they're there, you have to develop an opportunity to keep them up to date a little bit. Did you know there's something new? Do you know we have a training set up? There's just so many exciting ways to stay relevant. Relevant is a very important word, right? And you can't define your own relevance. That customer does.
I love that. I love that. Well, that's. I feel like that's a good note to end on, Ernie. We've had a very long and
Yeah,
comprehensive
I
conversation
apologize, but I
today.
tend to
Um,
kind of go on and on.
it's okay. I love it all. Thank you for joining me, and thank you for sharing. Going back and sharing your history and sharing your lessons learned, and providing kind of insights based on that experience. I really appreciate it.
The passion that I feel, even
Mhm.
after all these years, has not waned.